And welcome to this edition of the Reigns on the Cardinals podcast here on STLSportspage.com. Rob Reigns, Mike Reigns with you as we're going to wrap up a busy week for the Cardinals. Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Lots of news to discuss.
Lots of news. The Cardinals took advantage of the early into the baseball playoffs, the NLCS and the ALCS, so they'd have some time to make some announcements before Game 1 of the World Series begins on Friday night. As we know that Major League Baseball kind of frowns on teams making personnel announcements, major decisions might take away from the World Series, but plenty of time to make those news. And the Cardinals made a lot of news.
They did make a lot of news, definitely, and some interesting and I think positive news.
Yeah, I think so. I think everybody, the general reaction so far seems to be pretty positive to the moves that they have made and have announced. We're going to kind of just go through all those things one by one and talk about the different people who are involved and what our reaction to that particular hire. So I think we'll start with the Major League coaching staff. Of course, also first of all, I want to thank all of our sponsors here for the podcast: Archwell Health, the Drury Hotels, AAA Travel of Missouri, making this podcast free to everybody just to tune on wherever you get your podcast from. All the Spotify's and every other platform out there. Thanks to Mike, got that all set up, so you can find us anywhere out there on Alexa or anywhere. So appreciate him going to all that trouble to get that set up. So easier than ever to try to find us and get our take on what's going on with the Cardinals, as we mentioned. So personnel moves involving the coaching staff, and then as well as the front office, John Mozeliak having a press conference earlier this week to break down all of those moves. So let's start with the Major League staff and the changes there first, and then we'll move into the front office. Mike, I guess the two notable hires: Brant Brown will become the Cardinals' new hitting coach, and John Jay comes back to the Cardinals in a coaching capacity. Of course, the former player here, a longtime Cardinal, has been coaching with the Marlins. What do you think of those two moves?
And it also, as we talk about the coaching staff, it also means that Willie McGee is shifting out of that.
I was going to get to him in a second. Okay, yeah.
Well, sorry, I wasn't trying to jump the gun there, but no. Me, first, let's look at the hitting coach. Let's look at Brant Brown. I think, to me, I'm very excited that we got someone outside of the organization, because this philosophy that the Cardinals have tried for a long time, that Jeff Albert wanted to implement throughout the minor league system, a whole big philosophy of hitting and an approach, clearly hasn't worked, right? This team hasn't hit well in a long time, and it's time to find something new and find a new approach. And I'm hoping that, with this hitting coach, it could also lead to playing a different type of baseball, not just trying to go for the home run every time. Not that we can't do that, but we need to figure out how to manufacture runs through base hits, through hit and run, through sacrifices, things like that. And I'm hoping that that's something he can do.
Brant will be taking over for Turner Ward. He's 53 years old. He's got major league experience, played in the major leagues, and then has coached with both in the Dodgers, the Mariners, and in the Marlins farm system. Was with Jay actually on Skip Schumacher's staff in 2023 in Miami. So he does bring that experience as well as the outside voice. And I thought one of the interesting things about John Mozeliak commenting on the decision during the Zoom news conference earlier this week was that he kind of saw Brown as a combination of old school, new school, kind of a blend of what they had with Jeff Albert, maybe a blend of what they had with Turner Ward, and maybe merging that somewhere in the middle. So yeah, he has a lot of work to do. It'll be interesting to see how he responds. Of course, Brandon Allen is sticking on as the assistant hitting coach, so there will be some continuity from what the Cardinals were doing in the past.
Yes, and again, I think anyone that's watched this team knows that they need to learn how to manufacture hits, especially with runners in scoring position, especially with the bases loaded, and those things didn't happen last year. So hopefully an outside voice and an opinion on that can start to make some changes.
And then John Jay joins the staff. He has a kind of an undefined role, which just describes him as a coach. But then that's, again, exactly what Willie McGee's job was here as well. So you can count on John Jay working with the defensive drills with the outfielders and probably on base running as well, and then just the general overall help wherever his help is needed. And he's was the first base coach in Miami, so he's got some experience there as well. So good friends with Ali Marmol, good friends with Daniel Descalso. So should be a nice blend and another nice young coach that should be able to relate well to the younger players.
Happy to see Jay back, and I think anyone that's met him or knows anything about him knows that he's just a great guy, very much like Descalso, just a good quality person, and I think he's going to be a great addition in that clubhouse to help those guys. And as we talk about where his role kind of fills, the team has said that there are going to be more changes to the major league coaching staff coming. So some of those are not all set yet. I would be surprised if one of those moves is not Pop Warner or Stubby Clapp. And so then, that gives you Jay there. I know that some people have different thoughts on that, but I would think that, it's time for change. maybe Pop is one of those guys that finds himself in a new role somewhere else.
And part of that may be determined too by what other moves the club obviously still has a lot of moves to make as far as filling some of the personnel decisions within the farm system and stuff too. So obviously Warner and Clapp have had a long history in the Cardinals farm system as well. So possibly that something comes along with those departments. You mentioned Willie McGee. Of course, that's the one guy who will be leaving along with Turner Ward. And I think everybody will be sorry to see him go. I mean, I think I have not seen any direct comments from Willie, but it was described as a decision to allow him more flexibility in his schedule. Obviously, Major League coaches put in an awful lot of time, an awful lot of work. He still has some family responsibilities at home in California. So hopefully this will let him to be able to set his own schedule more and be able to maybe spend some time working with some of the outfielders in the minor leagues as well. I know that Jordan Walker, Victor Scott II, for two in particular, really benefited from working with Willie. And I hope that they don't, they'll be able to continue their work under the new staff or maybe even still work with Willie on a case-by-case basis.
And it's yet to be determined kind of where he's going to be, but I think we could all but assume that he's still going to be there at spring training the whole time and working with guys and getting things going. And so I think he's still going to have an active presence. It just allows him not to have to do some of the travel aspects of away games that he probably didn't want to do anymore.
Yeah, and put an awful lot of time. He's had a long and distinguished career, and he's always going to be a Cardinal. So great that he's still going to be involved in the organization. And I think they'll take him in whatever capacity he wants to fill. They'll be happy to have him do that. So, all right. So let's switch over to the front office moves as we visit here with Mike Raines on the STL Sports page, Raines on the Cardinals podcast. The big news, of course, the addition of Rob Surfolio, I know I was going to mess it up, who comes to the Cardinals from the Cleveland Guardians, where he was the director of player development. He's been hired as the assistant general manager for player development, a very key front office role, going to be reporting directly to Chaim Bloom as the Cardinals kind of revamp their farm system, kind of revamp some of the things that they want to do and how they develop players. The amazing thing about Surfolio, 32 years old, but of course he played baseball at Yale. Obviously, Yale baseball coach John Stuper has been a longtime friend. John and I talked the other day after the hire, and he was raving about Surfolio and what he was going to bring to the Cardinals and how much he thought he was a key guy in developing the way that the Cleveland Guardians play. And I know that's something that appeals to you as well as the way that the Guardians approach to how they play the game. And if he can bring some of that approach to St. Louis, I think that'll be a good thing.
He's definitely a young guy, but he's had, a solid 10-year career. You look at his resume in coaching, and you would think that he's been in a lot longer than that. Mm-hmm. But anyone that's watched the Cleveland Guardians over the last 10 years has known that they've had a lot of young homegrown talent that didn't cost them a lot of money. And so I think that's an exciting thing to look at, when you're tasked with the player development aspect of finding these kids out there and bringing them in and trying to create homegrown talent, because that's where you really can supplement the big name to your roster to build up a solid addition and solid piece to this team.
We are working on a story. I didn't mean to interrupt you. We're working on a story about Rob that'll be coming out on the website hopefully early next week with more details and about stories and talking to some of his friends and guys that he's been with over the years. So look forward to watching for that coming up early next week.
I was just going to say, you also mentioned he's a graduate of Yale, and a lot of people, the rumor mill is that, if Yale graduates hire Yale graduates, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Chaim Bloom is a Yale graduate. And for people that probably don't know, Bill DeWitt Jr. and Bill DeWitt III are also Yale graduates.
Yeah. So they didn't, Chaim Bloom did not play baseball at Yale. He did go to school there, and he's become friends with John Stuper after the fact. But it's the legacy that Yale baseball is putting into Major League Baseball now is pretty darn impressive. And two of Stuper's former players are now general managers, and Craig Breslow with the Red Sox, Mike Elias with the Orioles. And he's got another assistant GM in the Astros who all played for him the last few years. And, of course, probably his most famous former player currently out there is the governor of Florida, Ron DeSantis. So he's got a pretty strong lineage of guys who played for him who have gone on to be very successful. And I think there's no reason to expect that Rob Surfolio won't be the next one on that list.
If you play at Yale, you got to be a smart guy, right? And to get in there too. And so I'm excited that we've gone outside the organization. The last few years, when we've made changes, we've just kind of promoted internally. And I think it's time for new ideas and new blood and new perspective, because what we've been doing hasn't worked. Our track record in the postseason the last 5 years hasn't been there. And it's time to turn the club over and get a new, fresh idea and a fresh look on things, right? Because between Heim and Serfolio and whoever else those two decide to bring in to fill the rest of this player development staff, you're getting new look on the same guys that we may have seen already, but they may look at a guy like Tink Hence and see something else in him that we didn't see, or look at a guy like Quinn Matthews and see something else. As we start to get other eyes and other ideas, there's never a bad thing to have multiple people excited throughout.
And that was one of the things that they thought about Bloom having that year to spend in transition during the 2024 season. He went and saw a lot of these guys in the minor leagues, and now the reports that he developed are what the Cardinals are using to make this decisions about how they're going to revamp the farm system. And one of the things that they're going to do, and actually now the first responsibility for Serfolio is to hire a farm director, which is a position that's kind of been lacking for the last few years, and a director of performance. And they will both be kind of at a director level that will report directly to Serfolio, which is kind of streamlining the organization of the farm system. That I think has been one of the things that's been lacking for a while.
It has been missing, right? And it's proof in the results, right? It shows in the guys that come up and they're just not ready. An example is, however we want to say they've handled Jordan Walker or not, or Nolan Gorman, their talent is there, but there's still holes. And so hopefully these guys can help fill some of that gap as they go through.
One, of course, departure from the organization this week. It was announced that Matt Slater is stepping down to pursue other opportunities. Other organizations have been with the Cardinals for 17 years in a variety of roles, mostly in a scouting advisory kind of capacity. He was a special assistant for player procurement. And I don't think Matt got a lot of attention, a lot of name recognition because he wasn't the president of the baseball operations. He wasn't the general manager. But I think he filled a lot of key roles in the organization, and I think he's going to be missed. He was the guy responsible for signing some of the young international free agent that the Cardinals had. Also responsible for bringing Michaelis and some of the other guys over from Korea as he kind of expanded the Cardinals into the Japan and Far East Korean territory. Juan Ben Cho is one of his players, as well as the young Lin, the young Chinese Taiwan pitcher that I think you're going to see in the big leagues here in the next not too long. So even though Matt's going to be leaving, there's going to be remembrances of him in the past here when some of those guys get to the big leagues, because he was responsible for bringing a lot of those guys over here. So want to wish him well in his new career wherever it takes him outside of baseball. I think he's going to be very successful, but it's time probably for him and the organization to make a change.
Throughout his time here, yeah, he brought a lot of players on the radar the Cardinals staff probably didn't see in that, Asian territory over there that he had been bringing in. And so, wish him the best of luck in whatever role he goes to. But I think the one positive that I'm seeing out of this that Heim is doing is Heim is really trying to restructure the department to make everything make sense, make everybody have a role, make everybody have a defined area. And like you had just said, Slater was kind of in an area that didn't really make sense. He didn't really have a lot of say in a lot of things and was just kind of more of a advisor here. So I think they're trying to streamline that, like you said, with a farm director with certain pieces that make everything make sense.
Yeah, so wish Matt the best. He's a great baseball guy, and he's going to be successful no matter where he goes. All right, so let's turn our attention to the games on the field. And even though the Cardinals are not going to be in the World Series, to our chagrin, again, for the sitting out again since not 2013, but we're going to see some former Cardinals out there that we can be watching for, including the starting pitcher game one on Friday night as the Dodgers and Yankees get underway at Dodger Stadium. Jack Flaherty on the mound.
It is certainly nice to see former Cardinals doing well, right? I mean, I know it's a tough pill to swallow for some, and very happy for Tommy Edman to see him win the NLCS MVP. Just played really well. The last player to have 11 hits and 11 RBIs in a postseason series was David Ortiz. So when you can put those two in the same sentence, that's a pretty good track record, right? I think as a baseball fan, you're excited because you've got Judge and Ohtani and so many super stories that you can look at this, right? But then as a baseball fan on the other angle, you can look at it and say, well, is this going to cause some problems for baseball? Because you've got the two highest payroll teams in the World Series here, and MLB and those two teams can look at it and say, well, if you can pay the right players, you can get the World Series every year. And there's a handful of teams that can't do that. So what is that going to do between the top and the bottom teams throughout the next couple of years? Will be interesting to see.
There isn't any question that this is the World Series matchup that the MLB wanted with the Yankees and Dodgers. First time since 1981 that they will have been playing on the field in the World Series together. So the Yankees there for first time since 2009. So I think it'll be interesting to see how the ratings develop if they're as good as Major League Baseball thinks they're going to be with Ohtani and Judge and Soto and some of the other guys. So it should be a fun series. I mean, I know you and I both were rooting for some of the smaller market teams to get there, but that didn't happen. So I still should be quality baseball. I'm looking forward to watching the series. In addition to Flaherty and Edman on the Dodgers, of course, the other guy who's going to be playing a key role in the series, especially if the Yankees win, is Luke Weaver, who's become the closer for the Yankees. Had a couple of rough hiccups against Cleveland in that ALCS, but by and large has pitched really, really well since they moved him into that closer role in September.
For someone who's really never been a closer until September 1st, and he, really took the role and went with it like crazy and has become a almost dominant closer, right? You think of closers in today's era and they're throwing 100, 102. He's not throwing that at all. He's coming in with a, curveball at 88 and a changeup at 87 and trying to mix you up with deception. And it's really worked out. So hopefully he can get back on track. And regardless of whichever way you want the series to go, if you're a Cardinal fan, you can root for Flaherty and Edman, and you can root for Luke Weaver as opposed to rooting for that specific team or not.
You gonna make a prediction?
It's really hard to say, right? Because I think the Dodgers offense is really good when it gets going. But I think the Dodgers pitching outside of Flaherty is going to be a little bit more of a question mark, right? And I think that the key is these two offenses of what got the team there, right? It's the first World Series matchup to ever feature two 50 home run hitters, one on each team. It's never happened before. I'm going to say the Dodgers win in 6.
I'll take the Yankees in 7. And I think the interesting thing too is you spend $1 billion in the offseason like the Dodgers did last winter, and you still have to come up with the bullpen games in the World Series. You don't have enough guys to be a starting pitcher, so it's just one of the crazy aspects of this season. A couple of comments about some general Cardinal news too before we wrap up this edition of the show. Obviously mentioned all the news that's happened this week. Probably not a lot of Cardinal news expected over the next 5 or 6 days or so, because as we say, baseball does not like you to make major personnel announcements during the World Series when they want all their focus on that. We will get the coming soon in early November. You'll get the decisions about the Cardinals' first kind of hint of how they're going to structure the payroll for next year. Will be their decisions on the options for Lance Lynn, Kyle Gibson, Keenan Middleton. Then you get to the GM meetings in early November. And then, of course, the Gold Glove Awards. We did see Mason win the Fielding Bible Award for shortstop. Sometimes that's a precursor to who wins the Gold Glove, sometimes not. So you'll be able to see some of those news coming out in early November. And then, I think as we get to those trade market rumors will get started too as we hit into early November. So just because it was a busy week for the Cardinals, it's still, I think, going to be a very busy November and December as well. And look forward to seeing what the Cardinals end up doing.
And I would think there's a handful of players that are untouchable when it comes to the trading aspect throughout the season. But I would think the Cardinals are going to listen on more guys this year than they probably ever have before, because as they talked about, it's not necessarily a rebuild, it's kind of a reset. And so they're going to try to figure out, can they fill some of these roles with a few guys this year that really have their stock at the highest it's ever been.
I do want to mention 2 things coming up. We've mentioned before about the Rainbows for Kids, our charity here at STLSportsPage.com. We have a trivia night coming up on November 8th. Very happy that Cardinal broadcaster Brad Thompson has agreed to be our MC for the evening, so it'll be a lot of fun. I'm sure Brad will have some entertaining comments and entertaining stories as well. So almost sold out, but if you still want to get more information, you can click on the Rainbows for Kids tab on STLSportsPage.com to get that information, and be happy to try to fit you in. But we all almost sold out. So if you're interested in coming, please let us know as soon as you know about that. Have a few individual seats available. If you're not interested in getting or don't want to get a full table together. So that's coming up. And then, of course, as we start talking about all the moves the Cardinals are making, you get more excited about the 2025 season. Want to make sure you have the date for our Homewood Suites get-together down in Florida. Every year we get the party and a fundraiser for Rainbows for Kids, as well as just a baseball bash. So looking forward to that. It'll be March 11th at the Homewood Suites. You can go to the spring training page on STLSportsPage.com and have the link to the special discounted rate at the Homewood Suites, not only just for the party, if you can't go down to that week in spring training when the the party's going to be. You can still get our discounted rate throughout spring training as long as rooms are available by clicking on the link and following the tabs on the spring training page here on stlsportspage.com. So seems like March is a long way away, but it'll be here before we know it.
It will be here before we know it, and it will be a busy offseason for this club. So keep your ears tuned right here for all of that news.
Do want to mention, of course, we didn't have a show at the end of last week. I did mention on our broadcast last week that I was going under the knife and going on the injured list, had a total knee replacement on my right knee, and glad to report that it's going well. Appreciate all the kind words, all the comments from everybody that we got after the podcast last week, encouraging me and telling me that, we'll be successful and be good. So hopefully it will be. And the fact that we're back here broadcasting a week after the surgery, I think is a positive move. So appreciate all those kind words, and we'll be onward and upward and bigger and better from here on out. So Mike, thanks for the visit. Enjoy the weekend. Missouri, Alabama, big football game coming up, as well as, of course, the first couple games of the World Series. And we'll be back next week with another edition of Brains on the Cardinals podcast here on stlsportspage.com.